Hello and welcome in to another episode of Bengal Bites. This is a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from a real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 104. This is the Week 7 preview episode for the Thursday night football game, home game at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati, whiteout for all the people to see against the dreaded, hated, disrespected Pittsburgh Steelers. They're coming to town. It's going to be a do-or-die, must-win matchup for the Cincinnati Bengals. Their season is on life support at this stage. They just received a infusion of life by trading with the Cleveland Browns for veteran quarterback Joe Flacco. They got off to a bit of a slow start, as they have pretty much all season in the first game with Joe Flacco, but it was promising given the fact that he came in on very short notice, so the expectations were not high for Joe Flacco, and they kept it within a single-digit loss. Everybody was saying there's no such thing as moral victories. But if most of them were honest, they probably didn't expect to win the game. I know Zach Taylor said, we expected to win the game. We thought we were going to win. But Zach Taylor and his coaching staff may have been the only people who expected to win that game because they were 14-point underdogs. And so by keeping it close, they beat expectations. And so going into this Thursday night game against the Steelers, there's at least some signs of hope. You know, if Ryan Finley can beat the Steelers on prime time, then why the heck can't Joe Flacco, right? He didn't look mobile, but you know what? The Pittsburgh Steelers have an older quarterback. They've got Aaron Rodgers, who is even older than Joe Flacco, maybe by 6 months, 12 months, I'm not sure. But they're over 40. It's been dubbed the Icy Hot Bowl, I think, by Cam Hayward. And Aaron Rodgers hasn't played amazing football. He hasn't been like the Aaron Rodgers of old, but part of that's due to the fact that he's, understandably, not as mobile as he used to be. He's still got the arm, just like Joe Flacco. They're very similar at this stage in their career. Neither one of them is able to move or get away from pressure once it's in their vicinity. They're a sitting duck at that point. But obviously Joe Flacco is a lot bigger than Aaron Rodgers. It's like maybe he has the advantage in the size, but neither one of them is able to be a threat, especially not in the running game. The Steelers are near the bottom of the league with the Bengals in terms of running yards per game and success running the ball. So they're not great either. But the biggest difference between these two teams is the defense. Both teams have highly paid edge rushers, but the Steelers' TJ Watt is on another level in terms of right now, TJ Watt is leading the Steelers in passes defensed, or passes blocked, and interceptions with one. But Trey Hendrickson doesn't have that type of impact in terms of just having that innate ability to jump up in the path of where the quarterback just happens to be wanting to throw the ball. And also they play on opposite ends. Trey Hendrickson is coming off the quarterback's blind side from the left. TJ Watt plays most of the time on that right tackle side. So he's going to be going up against Amarius Mims. That's going to be another interesting battle between those two. How is Amarius Mims able to match up against TJ Watt? And then on the other side, Steelers list Patrick Queen. I'll have to go back and check who plays opposite. I think it's Alex Highsmith most of the time. He was out with a hamstring injury, but he's back. But they also have a ton of guys up front. Obviously, Cameron Hayward. They've got the rookie Derek Harmon out of Oregon. Apparently, he's been looking pretty good. I haven't watched a ton of Derek Harmon tape to be up on him, but they've got a ton of veterans all along this Steelers defense. Jalen Ramsey is kind of like a bigger version of the Mike Hilton nickel cornerback. He's, an older but bigger version of what the Bengals have in Dax Hill right now. Just kind of a rangy player. They are able to blitz pretty successfully with Jalen Ramsey. That's one of the things from an offensive scheming perspective. I imagine Zach Taylor and these offensive coaches are going to have to be watching out for where and how are the Steelers going to try to apply pressure to Joe Flacco, because it's coming. It's going to be inevitable. How are the Steelers going to try to disguise it, make guys think that they're blitzing when they're not, bring pressure from one way, run twists and stunts and all kinds of games that they can do with Keanu Benton, like I said, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig is also another one to watch out for. And they've got guys like rookie Jack Sawyer from Ohio State. People are familiar with him in the national championship game. So they've just got a ton of guys all over that defense that are tough for the Bengals to go up against. I don't expect them to have much success running the ball against this defense. Not that they've had really success running the ball in any of the games. And that they're going to have to lean on the passing game. But one thing that's going to be a little bit more difficult for the Bengals going into this game is they're going to be down two of their top receiving tight end options. Mike Gesicki was put on injured reserve this week. He had that pec injury after 2 snaps last week. It sounds like a pretty serious injury because he's on injured reserve. That means he's going to be out at least 4 weeks. They didn't say it was like a season-ending injury, but we'll have to see if it's going to require a surgery or something like that. But serious pec injuries can keep a player out for an entire season. I remember right after the draft, William Jackson III had a pec injury, I think in training camp, or maybe it was before training camp, that kept him out his entire rookie season. And then, of course, Trey Waynes, the infamous, one of the worst trades in Bengals history, or free agents, I should say, not a trade, but Trey Waynes came in as a free agent during that COVID pandemic year where they couldn't get him his physical because of the doctors couldn't see him in person, so he couldn't sign his contract. And then it was all this, acrimony between him and the team. And then he finally came in, signed his contract, and then like the first day he was lifting weights and blew his pec out. That's happened with a number of guys. Wyatt Hubert was a draft pick who blew his pec out working out, lifting before training camp even started his rookie year, and so he was on the injured list, and then he retired before he even played a snap. But I think Wyatt Hubert tried to come back with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm getting off the track here. Who cares about Wyatt Hubert and the Kansas City Chiefs? We're talking about the Steelers right now. Steelers defense is looking tough. Bengals, like I said, the 2 tight ends, Gesicki, and then Tanner Hudson is going to also be out with a concussion that he suffered. I'm not sure when. I tried to go back and watch the film. I watched like the last 10 or 15 plays that Tanner Hudson was involved in that game in Green Bay, but I wasn't really able to find anything. So I don't know when it happened exactly. I didn't see him take any. I watched all of his receptions. Like, he didn't get tackled and get hit in the head from what I saw. So I'm not sure how he suffered it or when Tanner Hudson suffered it. Doesn't matter at this point. That means they're going to be down Gesicki and Hudson. We're going to have Noah Fant, Drew Sample, and Cam Grandy is their 3rd tight end. I don't know if they have anybody on the practice squad to bring up to play special teams, what they're going to do in terms of replacing Tanner Hudson on the special teams units. Maybe one of those linebackers, Shaka Hayward, maybe even Logan Wilson. That's one thing to talk about if we switch over to the Bengals defensively. one of the big stories was high-paid and veteran linebacker Logan Wilson, who is in the second year of a 4-year contract extension that he signed a couple of seasons ago. He basically got benched and replaced by rookie Barrett Carter out of Clemson. I think he was the 4th-round pick this year. They drafted 2 linebackers in the draft, Demetrius Knight Jr. in the 2nd round, and then Barrett Carter. Both of those guys played the majority of the snaps at inside linebacker with varied results. Especially there was the play everybody was talking about, the touchdown up the middle to Josh Jacobs. There was Demetrius Knight on the left, Barrett Carter on the right. Both of them took a step up, and it was like Noah parting the Red Sea down the middle. Josh Jacobs just took the handoff and ran straight up the middle right between both of them, right between both Bengals safeties, Geno Stone and Jordan Battle. Neither one of them really seemed interested in making a tackle at the goal line. This seemed a lot like the Jaden Daniels touchdown against the Washington Commanders, to be honest, where people were trying to give Jordan Battle the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, well, if it were the regular season, he would have hit him, but since it was preseason, he let him score a touchdown. Well, this game against the Packers was the regular season, and it looked very similar to that in that they just kind of gave him a hug and escorted him into the end zone instead of really putting much of a hit on him. And after the game, we found out that Josh Jacobs was battling some kind of illness, stomach bug, whatever it was. He was getting sick on the field, or I don't know, on the sidelines. It sounded like he was in physical distress, but still had 2 touchdowns. We also learned that Ja'Marr Chase had some kind of an illness throughout last week that kind of limited him in practice and what he could do. And he wasn't able to get that many reps with Joe Flacco. He said he got about 12 reps in practice with Joe Flacco, but he was able to go through the walkthrough and obviously had enough left in the tank to recover. He didn't mention what it was, but he was just talking about how he needed to get hydrated again and start eating and drinking and doing stuff. So maybe he had, who knows what it was, but it sounded like Ja'Marr Chase was not 100% last week, and he still had almost 100 yards receiving on 10 catches and a touchdown. Joe Flacco went him late in that game, especially on that last drive, or second to last drive the Bengals had on offense. I think he had about 5 or 6 targets alone in that one drive. And it was not surprising, but it's always, Ja'Marr Chase said after the game that on that touchdown that he had, there was some play call from Zach Taylor. Ja'Marr Chase said, I'm going to do this, and you just throw me the ball, basically. And Joe Flacco didn't make it later. He didn't say, Ja'Marr's out there changing every single play and, overriding the coach and that kind of thing. It was maybe, just a little bit of audible by Ja'Marr Chase because he knows the offense better than Joe Flacco does at this point. Ja'Marr Chase has been playing in this offense for 5 seasons now, so he understands what they're trying to do. It's all universal, between every team. They're all running the same type of concept, so that just the terminology, what you call certain things might be different, but it's not like any team has completely reinvented the game of football and have their own unique thing that nobody else has. Everybody's got everything in the toolkit at this point. And if anybody shows anything that works, other teams will try to copy it, just like the Wildcat or the read option or even the flea flicker play that Jake Browning got destroyed from behind on by Aiden Hutchinson in that Lions game I'm thinking of. But this is another test for Al Golden. Is he going to be able to figure out a way to stop the Steelers, who haven't been amazing on defense, but in contrast to the Bengals, who are going to be somewhat depleted at tight end, the Steelers have a dearth of tight ends. They have 4 tight ends, and they're all contributing and good in their own way. They've got this huge mountain of a man in Darnell Washington. He is listed at 6'7", 264 pounds, just a beast of a human being. Going to be an extreme challenge for any of the Bengals defensive backs or linebackers for that matter to try to guard him when Aaron Rodgers sees him open in any capacity, and going to be even more of a challenge to try to tackle. Once he gets ahead of steam, we've seen the Bengals defensive backs not be so eager to, try to come up and make a hit on anybody. And then, of course, the Steelers have the two veterans, Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth, both of whom are great receiving options. Probably Jonnu Smith a little bit more of a more receiving threat than Freiermuth, but Freiermuth is a dynamic weapon as well. And then they've got Connor Hayward, the little brother of Cam Hayward. He's more of a special teams contributor, but is also a willing and able blocker and just an all-around good football player. It kind of runs in the family, the Hayward family. They've got a bunch of Haywards in the league and going all the way back. He's also their fullback in short yardage situations. The Bengals, as far as I can think, they've mostly used Drew Sample or Cody Ford in that role. But the Bengals don't have a true fullback on the roster. They have been using two tight ends, but with those Hudson and Gesicki out, it's going to be interesting to see how the Bengals come out offensively. What kind of personnel? Do they go more 11 personnel with three wide receivers, one tight end, one running back? And if they do, who is going to be the third receiver? Because it's been obviously Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as the top two, and then mostly Andre Iosivas as the third wide receiver. But last week, Andre had 3 drops on 5 targets, only 1 catch did he bring in, and he hasn't been playing that well. He hasn't been producing, and it's in a results-based league. As much as I love Andre, I am rooting for him. I will continue to say that. However, he hasn't been catching the football very well, and Mitch Tinsley has been doing everything the right way. His only catch is a touchdown, an amazing one-handed catch. I would imagine that he would catch some of those passes that Andre Iosivas dropped. He's not as big as Andre, and maybe he's not able to block as well as Andre. But like we saw on that 3-yard or on the first play from offense, they had a end around to Jamar Chase. Andre Iosivas and T. Higgins were out on the right side. They were supposed to be blocking for Jamar. That play ended up in a 3-yard loss because they didn't get great blocking out of Andre. So if he's not catching the ball and he's not an exceptional blocker, he's going to have to, he's obviously going to have to step it up. There's no, this just because he has one bad game, I'm not totally writing him off. And the same thing goes for offensive line. Dalton Reisner has been in and out of the lineup. He came in right before the season, didn't end up starting the first game of the season at guard on the Bengals offensive line. And then in the first game against the Cleveland Browns, Lucas Patrick, who has not been activated off injured reserve as far as I know, injured his calf. Dalton Reisner had to come in and play the rest of that game. He played that game and then the weeks 2 and 3, but got benched in favor of Jalen Rivers, the rookie, at right guard. But then Dylan Fairchild got injured against the Lions, so against the Packers, Dalton Reisner was back in against, was it his former team? Might have been his former team. He played against the Dalton Reisner played for the Vikings, but so maybe he's played against the Packers. But anyway, Dalton Reisner had to play last week at left guard and seemed to hold his own, played pretty well next to Orlando Brown on the left side and Ted Karras at center. They haven't, as far as I know, said who is going to be playing at left or right guard in this game. If Dylan Fairchild, the rookie, is able to come back from his knee injury that he had. Would they put him back into the lineup? You never want to lose your position due to injury. So he was the left guard all the way through training camp. And that's been his position. Dalton Risner was just kind of at left guard for a game, and he showed that he's, capable. So then it's a question of, if they want to have the 5 best offensive linemen on the field, is Dalton Risner better than Jalen Rivers and or Dylan Fairchild and or Lucas Patrick, who could potentially come back from injury? It's an interesting question, an interesting conundrum for this Bengals coaching staff. Which combination of players is going to give them their best chance to succeed against the Steelers? This is a shortened week. The game is Thursday. It's going to be Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit on the call, which is good and bad. It's a standalone primetime game, so the team is going to be in the spotlight. But then there's kind of a little bit of a letdown come the weekend. There's no Bengals game on Sunday to watch, but that's okay. We'll have to get ready for this game. If you're going to the game, obviously wear white. And it's a good thing for people who have come from internationally. I know there's a group from the UK. The Bengals UK group is flying in. And even though the team is on a 4-game losing streak, they're still excited to come in and see the team play, because there is a sign of hope, a sign of life with Joe Flacco. It would be miserable to go into another game 4 in a row losing with Jake Browning at quarterback. At least they can keep it respectable. That's the thing we saw from the Bengals offensively in the second half specifically, was Joe Flacco basically just figuring out, if I throw the ball up the sideline to Jamar Chase and he's one-on-one in man coverage, he's going to find a way to make a play on it. They did that multiple times where the defensive back had his back turned and Jamar Chase just figured out a way to catch it if the ball was in his general vicinity. And it's so funny because his statistics so far this season aren't on pace for what they had been compared to last season when he was leading the league in like every category, which you can't do. You can't expect that from Jamar every season. But people are like, oh, Jamar Chase isn't good anymore. It's like, that's just ridiculous. Obviously it has a lot to do with the whole offense. It's a team game. He can't block for himself. He can't throw the ball to himself. He's still just as good or better than he's ever been. It's just he's kind of a victim of circumstances right now. If Joe Flacco can continue to get the ball, but not force the ball to Jamar and T. Higgins, and Noah Fant, Chase Brown, he's been relatively quiet in the passing and the running game, Chase Brown. But he can do more in all phases. People had a lot of high expectations for him that I'm sure he didn't specify exactly what his goals were going into this season, but I'm sure Chase Brown's personal goals were, not what he's averaging right now. So I feel like everybody on the Bengals feel like they could have played better all season. Obviously, they're 2-4. They've lost 4 games in a row. They had high hopes. They were talking about, Zach Taylor was talking about going to the Super Bowl in the beginning of the season. And Al Golden was talking about how they have to maintain the Santa Clara standard because that's where the Super Bowl is going to be this season. If they want to have any hope of getting to the playoffs, much less a Super Bowl, they're going to have to start winning games. If they start continuing to lose, and they've got 3 games in a row. The Bengals have the Steelers on this Thursday night. Then they've got that little bit of an extra break in between this and their next game, which is going to be against the Jets, who are currently 0-6. Justin Fields had negative 10 yards of net passing in their last game. they're not looking good. So you don't want to guarantee victory, but hopefully they'll at least win that game against the Jets. And then they've got the Bears, who are looking okay, but not amazing, beatable team. I don't get too much into this idea of home field advantage and just chalk up losses to the fact that the team has been on the road. Zach Taylor makes such a big deal out of the playing on the road factor. He was like, well, going in on the road. He said that about 20 times in his press conference about how it was so tough to be on the road. And he always says that about being on the road is so hard. And, you can't win on the road. I know it's maybe somewhat more difficult in terms of communication when other fans are making a lot of noise and your offense can't go on a cadence, an audible cadence, but they should be used to a silent snap count at this point. And you can't tell me that the Seattle Seahawks head coach, Mike McDaniel, this is his second year as head coach for the Seahawks, and he is 10-1 in his first 11 road games, which is, I think, some kind of a record. I think he's the first coach in NFL history to win 9 of his first 10 road games. But it clearly is possible. It's definitely not impossible to win games when you're the road team. But Zach Taylor acts like it's such a monumental challenge. But so that means now that they're going to be at home for these 3 games in a row, no excuse about being on the road. They have the advantage. The home team is going to be, in Zach Taylor's mind, they should be expected to win this game. I think there's something like 5.5 point underdogs, according to most of the betting sites out there. I haven't checked because this isn't a gambling podcast, but most people around the league who are neutral observers are probably expecting the Steelers to win this game for a multitude of reasons. Mike Tomlin is not taking this game lightly, obviously, because when they asked him what did he think about having to play Joe Flacco and the Bengals this week, he said, well, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's the Cleveland Browns general manager, Andrew Berry, must be smarter than him and the Steelers because it doesn't make sense for them to trade away a guy who was their opening day starting quarterback. They thought enough of him to be their starting quarterback at the beginning of the season, but then they want to trade him away to a team in their division, a division rival who needs a quarterback, which I kind of agree with. It makes sense. And from the Browns' perspective, they can't, like I said, they can't come out and say they're intentionally trying to lose, but that's pretty much what the Browns are trying to do. And maybe that's what Mike Tomlin was insinuating. It didn't really have anything to do with the Bengals at all. And people in Cincinnati were all excited about this. I think just because it was Mike Tomlin showing irritation about the situation, not necessarily at the Bengals. Obviously, the Bengals needed to trade for Joe Flacco. He understood that part of it. Everybody, after watching Jake Browning, understood why they needed to trade for a quarterback. Maybe Mike Tomlin was annoyed at the fact that he wanted to play Jake Browning instead of Joe Flacco. I mean, I don't blame him for that either. I would want to play Jake Browning if I were him too, but I think it's for the best, for everybody's sake. For the Amazon Prime viewers on Thursday night, nobody wants to watch another game of Jake Browning. Even Jake Browning probably doesn't want that at this point. As I've said, football is a team game. It's not just about who's playing quarterback, as much as you see that when they show the results from other games around the league. When I'm watching like the Bengals game, they'll show the results from some other game and it'll show just the quarterback for the team. Jordan Love versus Joe Flacco, like we saw last week, or Dylan Gabriel versus Aaron Rodgers last week. As you know, it's always the quarterback versus the other quarterback and who won. The outcome of the game is so much more than that. But Aaron Rodgers has a 3-0 career record against Joe Flacco, and both of them were starting quarterbacks in previous matchups. So far, the Steelers are 4-1. For whatever reason, most people don't give the Steelers a lot of respect. They don't give them a lot of credit. Everybody had the Baltimore Ravens to be leading the AFC North and going back to the playoffs. But then they got derailed when Lamar Jackson pulled his hamstring. But they lost a couple close games even when Lamar was playing, to be fair. But nobody really gave the Steelers a chance to win the division. But now at 4-1, they're definitely in the driver's seat, considering the fact the Bengals only have 2 wins. The Browns and Ravens both have 1. And if the Steelers were able to pull out this victory against the Bengals, their division rival, this would make them 5-1 and give them another win in the division record, which counts more in the standings. Your division record counts more. Your conference, AFC or NFC record counts a little bit more in terms of the seeding for the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. Both of these teams rely heavily on quick passing game because both of their quarterbacks are super old and don't want to get hit. And that's going to mean that both teams are going to have to try to take those quick passes away. And defensively, it's going to be a question who's going to match up against DK Metcalf. Cam Taylor-Britt had some of his best moments in his career against DK Metcalf when he was with the Steelers, and against George Pickens when he was, DK Metcalf when he was with the Seahawks, and George Pickens when he was with the Steelers. 2 big physical receivers. George Pickens obviously isn't with the Steelers, so it's just going to be DK Metcalf. But Cam Taylor-Britt has not been playing his best football, to say the least, this season. He's been getting beat. Last week, he got beat up the left sideline. He was in blanketed coverage. He was right there, but just not able to make a play on the ball in the air on Matthew Golden for the Packers. There was another play Matthew Golden caught at the end of the game. It looked like, when you go back and watch on replay, and people have been calling this out, it was a crossing route by Matthew Golden, and it looked like everybody had man-to-man coverage except for Cam Taylor-Britt, who kind of followed Matthew Golden halfway down the field and then just let him go. And Cam Taylor-Britt was just like in the middle of the field, not guarding anybody. He was just guarding green grass, which was not effective at stopping the Green Bay Packers, obviously. So we don't know if they're going to change up the lineup. DJ Turner has been playing the best he's played in his career. He had 5 pass breakups last week against those Packers. So he's been playing well, but he's not the biggest guy. He's more of an undersized, fast cornerback. So DK Metcalf, who is, I'll have to look up, he's huge. That's all you need to know, basically, is DK Metcalf is enormous and not the best matchup for DJ Turner. He's listed at 6'4", 230. That is not a great matchup. If I look at DJ Turner, he was one of the fastest guys in the draft. He ran 4.2, mid 4.2s, but he's listed at 5'11", 185. So going up against 6'4", 230 is going to be probably a struggle for DJ Turner. Maybe a little bit better for Cam Taylor-Britt, or Dax Hill is possibly, but he's not, that's outside cornerback isn't necessarily his strongest suit either. So it's an interesting question. Just like it's a question about the offensive line, this Bengals roster is kind of a team in flux. The linebacker position is in flux, offensive line, tight end, even running back. We kind of saw a 50-50 split between Chase Brown and Samaje Perine at running back. I don't know if that's because Samaje's had a little bit more success in breaking tackles in the running game, or if they like him better as a pass blocker. I'm not sure. Or maybe as a pass option. I mentioned maybe even wide receiver could see some changes to the snap counts. Maybe, Charlie Jones hasn't showed a lot in the returning game. I don't know if they would consider making switch at punt return and giving someone else a chance, but this would really be a good opportunity for Jermaine Burton to make his presence known, the third-round pick from last year, who's been inactive every week. And that's a real disappointment because coming into this season, we had heard about how he had kind of turned his whole life around and got himself in order after a rough end to his rookie season. And hopefully things are going to be on an upward trajectory. And he made the team. Maybe that's just because he had been such a high draft pick and the Bengals didn't want to completely give up on him. But he made the team, made the roster. But then I don't know what he's been doing in terms of in the meeting room, in the locker room, or on the practice fields outside of game day. But he hasn't been doing enough, apparently, to be active on game days. But he's one of those guys who has just the pure athleticism to be a good returner, since Charlie Jones has not been that effective, and he's also been battling some injury. He's been listed as questionable the last 2 weeks, and he is this week with a oblique or ribs injury, some kind of an abdomen injury. That might have happened when he got body slammed. There's a personal foul penalty, unnecessary roughness. He got suplexed, belly to back suplex in the Packers game on one of those returns. But guys are hitting, they just can't. He's like a magnet for hits. Guys just love hitting Charlie Jones, throwing him all over the place like a rag doll. Maybe Mitch Tinsley could contribute in special teams. He returned one punt when Charlie Jones, or a couple, maybe one or two, when he was out. So that's going to be interesting. And then it's kind of amazing that the only position that hasn't seen any real change, has been 100% consistent except for injury, was the safety position. Jordan Battle and Geno Stone have solidified their spots at safeties. Geno Stone has a couple of interceptions this season on tipped passes, but the tackling by both those guys has been lackluster. Lots of missed tackles out of the safeties. And we haven't seen P.J. Jules or Tyson Anderson. And Dejon Anthony is still on injured reserves, and so is Cedric Johnson. This is going into week 7. Both of those guys have been on injured reserve for the entire season, and they were eligible to come back after the first 4 weeks. They had to sit out 4 weeks, I think it was, but now they've been eligible. We haven't had any, I guess none of the reporters asked about Cedric Johnson or Dejon Anthony. I don't know the severity of their injuries, but I thought they were just hamstring, pulled muscle. I didn't think it was anything that was required surgery or anything like that, but the Bengals defensively could use those guys. Anything at this point. They're not playing that well, but special teams wise, Evan McPherson showed that he's capable of making a field goal from 67 yards out, even though it didn't count. Packers called that timeout. He can make them from long distance if given the opportunity. So I was glad to see Zach Taylor at least try it for once. And Ryan Rico, I want to see him improve in terms of his precision kicking. He's got the strong leg, and he's been working on the consistency, I know, but he's got too many touchbacks. He's got 7 touchbacks. He's got to cut that in half. Cut down on the touchbacks, because that is a key part of the game. The field position game, being able to pin those teams deep and try to give this defense a little bit of an advantage over those other teams. Obviously, it wasn't good when Jake Browning was throwing interceptions like in the Bengals territory, backing up the Bengals defense. We need the opposite of that. We need Ryan Rico to pin him deep or coffin corner. Kick it out of bounds within the 10-yard line or 5-yard line. They're going to need something like that to beat the Steelers team most likely, because the Steelers are tough, hard-nosed. They're going to be very tough defending the Bengals on the ground. And their defensive backs, Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey isn't so much of an outside cornerback anymore, but the Steelers have Darius Slay as one of their cornerbacks. He's going to be playing in this game he had a shoulder injury, but Darius Slay is supposed to be starting in this game. Jabril Peppers was he with the Browns or the Patriots? I can't remember, but he's been in the league forever. They got Chuck Clark. They got Juan Thornhill, Brandon Eccles. I'm recognizing some of these guys from AFC East. I think those guys were on the Patriots and the Jets, but a lot of savvy veteran players on the Steelers. And I think on the injury report, Malik Harrison is questionable for this game. He's been on injured reserve. He's at linebacker for the Steelers. He is questionable. He could be activated for this game. That's another one that the Bengals don't want to see. Deshaun Elliott is questionable. Calvin Austin, the third wide receiver for the Steelers, is going to be out with a shoulder injury. Steelers otherwise are mostly healthy. So the Bengals on the injury front are maybe a little bit more at a disadvantage than the Steelers. And the big question that I forgot to bring up was Trey Hendrickson. Is he going to play in this game? Trey Hendrickson is the linchpin of the Bengals and what they're trying to do defensively. He's the only one, or not the only one, but he's the one getting a lot of the pressures and the sacks and quarterback hits on the Bengals defense. Without him, it was and is noticeable when he's not on the field. So hopefully he's able to play. He did not practice, and he didn't play in the entire second half on Sunday. So it's a short week. I don't know what it is. They said it was a back initially, but then they said it was a hip. I don't know how that. They're close, they're connected, but a back and a hip aren't really the same thing. Zach Taylor said it was a back contusion. I don't know. Maybe he got hit in the butt. I don't know what they're talking about. But, they're very vague and abstract with every injury discussion. I don't know what's going on with Trey Hendrickson, but hopefully, for the Bengals' sake, he's able to play in this game. And hopefully, what doesn't happen is what Jamar Chase was talking about after the game against the Packers. They were asking him about the game against the Steelers, and he said something like, yeah, we know the Steelers are going to try to come in and kill us and raw dog us and, really beat us up. And I was like, did Jamar just say the Steelers were going to try to raw dog them? And I went back and I turned on closed captions, and YouTube verified, yes, Jamar Chase said the Steelers were going to try to, quote, raw dog us. I was like, what? And so hopefully that doesn't happen, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. Doesn't sound good. You don't want that. Joe Flacco, he is very relaxed and calm and seems like a good guy, genuine, open, honest, natural speaking guy. It is weird that he's got 5 children and he's like moving all over the country just to play football, and he's got like millions of dollars. But I guess he can hire a nanny or do whatever he's got to do. But at this point, it is kind of confusing. Why is Joe Flacco still playing? And he says he gets that question all the time, and it's just he feels like he can still play in the NFL. He doesn't take it for granted, and he wants to keep playing as long as he's able to do it because he knows that once it's over, it's over. There's, you only get one opportunity. You can't, come back when you're 50 years old and start playing in the NFL again. So he's making the most of his career, his experience. I don't think he's had like a Hall of Fame career or anything like that, but he does have a Super Bowl under his belt. And maybe that's the thing that hooked Joe Flacco, was winning that Super Bowl so early in his career, so long ago at this point, with the Baltimore Ravens when he was a rookie with Ray Lewis and all those guys, Ed Reed, and way back when. Maybe that's kind of inspired him to keep going, thinking like, he's got that burning desire, that itch to get back to that high he had. Keep chasing that high, it's never as good as the first time or whatever. Maybe that's what Joe Flacco has been after this whole time. Hopefully something like that. I'm not going to say they're going to get, like I said, I'm not going to get back to the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco, but at least keep it interesting and competitive, because it's a lot more fun when the team is at least competing with the other team. Is that, it's something you take for granted until you have to watch 2 back-to-back games where they lose by 25 plus points. And, those embarrassing losses aren't good for anybody. It's not good for Tennessee Titans former head coach Brian Callahan, who was fired on Monday or Tuesday of this week. Not surprisingly, his father, Bill Callahan, also resigned as offensive line coach for the Titans. But that was not a great tenure for a former Zach Taylor coach. The Zach Taylor coaching tree, like I said, might be short and stumpy. Brian Callahan, I think he was like, the week 6. So they played 17 plus 6 is 23 games, and he won 4 of them. So he was 4-19 as an NFL head coach, if I got my math right there. 4-19, not good, but not that much worse than Zach Taylor's first, couple seasons as Bengals head coach. He was 2-14 the first year, and then 4-12 the next year. Or did they play 17 games? No, 4-12 the next year. And they didn't get off to like a hot start that second year either. So it's amazing to me that Zach Taylor still has a job, but thanks to Jamar Chase, he has remained employed by the Bengals and got extended all the way until next season. But he's probably safe this season no matter what. But if they don't win some games, there's going to be questions about Zach Taylor. There's always going to be excuse of Joe Burrow got hurt, but they've got Joe Flacco now. So there's no more excuse. There's no more excuse about being on the road. They're going to be at home for 3 games in a row. They got everything they need to go out and win. So shock the world, pull off the Ryan Finley upset, and give the fans at Paycor Stadium something to celebrate and go back to the United Kingdom, wherever they came from, with a smile on their face. I think that's about all I wanted to cover on this episode. Oh, one last thing. There was one of the reporters about the Steelers was talking about Aaron Rodgers, and basically didn't sound like this guy was a fan of Aaron Rodgers' attitude. He sounded very prickly and ready to get into a fight with anybody at any time. The opposite of Joe Flacco. So it could be much worse. We could have Jake Browning like on the verge of tears saying how bad he sucks. We could have Aaron Rodgers getting all salty and prickly. But we got Joe Flacco, even though he played for the Ravens and he was a division rival and he played for the Browns. He was the gift that keeps on giving. He kind of gave us those 2 gift interceptions when he was playing for the Browns. Now he's coming in playing for the Bengals, and hopefully he's going to have more success than Jake Browning. That's all I can really hope for. So on that note, I'm going to thank you for listening. Let me know what you think of this podcast. I try not to be overly biased and homer for the Bengals, and I'm purposely trying to be objective, which I know doesn't suit everybody. It's not to everybody's tastes. But if you enjoyed this podcast, give me a subscribe, thumbs up, do all this stuff. Send me an email. Let me know what you think about the Bengals season or this podcast or whatever you're just thinking about stuff in general. How's it going out there? Let me know. Bengal Bites Podcast at gmail.com. And so until next time, we're going to come back and do the recap of this game. Hopefully it's a good one. We have lots of things to celebrate. On that note, I'm going to leave you with a WhoDey and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.